Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the penultimate session of day 3 of the eFrames 2020. This session is titled Regulating Creativity, Overcoming Legacy Challenges to Shape the Future of Media and Entertainment. To tell us more and to introduce this heavy-duty panel, I would like to invite the moderator, Mr. Vivek Koto, Executive Director and co-founder, Media Partners Asia. Mr. Vivek, the platform is all yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to host a great session. We have a very diverse group of speakers today, and our focus today is really about regulating the creative economy. We're living in a very exciting age, but the broadcasting sector in India, as it converges into the digital economy, has huge opportunities. But also we have to overcome legacy challenges to really shape the future of this dynamic sector. And we have to look to other markets, and we also have to have a course correction in our markets, which has been fundamentally burdened by the pressure of oppressive regulation in recent years. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our guests, Mr. Ajit Pai, Chairman of the Federal Communications Commission. Ajit, welcome. Dr. R.S. Sharma, Chairman of the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India. Ms. Jyoti Jindgar Bhanot, Secretary of the Competition Commission of India, and Mr. Atul Kumar Tiwari, Additional Secretary for the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting. Each of our esteemed guests are going to open with approximately 3 to 5 minutes of opening comments and an address, and then we're going to get down to it with questions from myself and hopefully from some of our online attendees. Thank you. Ajit, over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Vivek. Thanks to Vicky, as always, and it's great to see my friends and co-panelists here virtually. It's great to be back with Vicky. This is the first time since 2014 that I've had a chance to speak with you, and I'm sorry that it took me so long to return, but I do hope that absence makes the heart grow fonder, even when the absence is that of a government regulator. Now, looking back at my 2014 remarks, I will say that one of the things I did identify back then was how new technologies and trends would reshape the media and entertainment landscape. Back then, for example, I suggested that 2014 was a critical moment for internet video. And here we are in 2020, thanks to faster fixed broadband networks, to 4G LTE, and faster Wi-Fi. Now we're seeing over-the-top providers impacting the market in a very big way, and mobile in particular is exploding when it comes to video. There's so many choices for OTT here in the United States that we're calling it the streaming wars. Meanwhile, more than 60% of video viewing worldwide is on mobile devices. And I think that transformation is only set to continue with technology reshaping the media landscape even further. For example, here in the US, new broadcast TV standards are being developed, including the ATSC 3.0 next generation TV standard that's being rolled out. This next generation of over-the-air broadcasting is an IP-based service that will enable interactive programming, ultra HD, picture quality, and much more targeted advertising. Thanks in part to the FCC's efforts, we've also opened the doors here in the US to the rollout of Wi-Fi 6, the next generation of Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi 6 will be over 2.5 times faster than the current standard. It'll offer gigabit Wi-Fi over its mobile devices, and it'll offer better performance for these devices. And of course, another game changer for media and entertainment, I think, is going to be 5G. In 2018, the average mobile connection worldwide was 13 megabits per second. 5G networks can deliver wireless connectivity measured in gigabits, not in megabits. And of course, with 5G, you get much less latency than you would with a standard connection. And so the wireless networks that today support perhaps 1,000 devices per square kilometer could in the future support 1 million devices, many of them connected to video and other entertainment type services. And so one might ask, well, what will the advances of 5G mean for the entertainment sector? I think one of the things it will mean is no more buffering. I think people already love mobile video, and they're consuming more and more of it every single day. And imagine how much more of that content they're going to demand when they don't have any slow load times or midstream interruptions. Now, it's no big surprise, especially for this audience, that improvements in connectivity will accelerate the shift to streaming on demand and mobile video. But in terms of some of the new applications and services that will be unlocked by 5G, I think when it comes to entertainment, The categories where most analysts are predicting significant breakthroughs are virtual reality and augmented reality. VR and AR, for example, can offer new platforms for storytellers to create content unlike anything we've ever seen. And so I'm very bullish on the potential of that and look forward to seeing it develop. But if you ask me what entertainment category is going to see the most technology-fueled growth, I'd actually bet on gaming. Now, first of all, gaming is already huge. It's much larger than most people realize. In 2019, for instance, consumers spent over 120 billion US dollars on gaming, digital games worldwide. For context, that is 3 times the global box office for movies in the entire world in 2019. Looking long-term, gaming is especially popular with digital natives who grew up in the internet era. Last year, 52% of Gen Z and 46% of millennials in the US regularly played video games for hour-plus stretches. And they're not just playing them, they're also watching them too. More than 200 million people, for example, watch gaming content on YouTube. Just last month, Twitch had more than 7 million users watch over 1.6 billion hours of content. It's really popular right now the world over. And in my view, market analyst Matthew Ball offers a keen insight into why gaming could be the entertainment space's biggest beneficiary from 5G. Because as he sees it, gaming relies on a combination of technology, content, and an innovative business model. And gaming, he believes, more than TV or music, is going to be driven by that technological growth. Add all this together, and I think you understand why Netflix CEO Reed Hastings once said that he believes that Netflix's biggest competitor is the video game Fortnite. And as a regulator, at least, and as a consumer, that is heartening, because obviously our job is to promote the public interest, and competition and innovation drives that, and that's what we seek to promote. And as a consumer, of course, that means that there's more choice than ever before. I don't pretend to know where the marketplace is going to go for sure, but we do know that it's going to be an even greater challenge to match the regulations to the times in which we live. So I know that the longer I speak, of course, the longer you have to wait to hear my distinguished friend, the chairman of the TRAI. It's been my honor to serve as Chairman Sharma's warm-up act, you might say, this evening. I look forward to our question and answer session. And thank you again to Vicky for giving me this opportunity. It's just wonderful to see you again. And hopefully I get to see you in the real world once circumstances permit. Thank you, Vivek.
Thank you. And over to our esteemed guest, Chairman Sharma.
Well, thank you, Vivek. Thank you very much. And, it's again, this is the Vicky Frames event is one such event which I have been attending from year to year, almost continuously since the time I have been in TRAI. And really, I must compliment you that, you have maintained the standard, and the caliber and level of discussion has been extremely wonderful. And this is also an event, you have had, this is, I suppose, the last day of this event. So my compliments to you all. And this also provided me an opportunity to again meet my dear friend, Chairman Pai, whom I have been meeting again since last about 5 years. We have known each other, and our mutual respect has gone, from place height to height, so to say. In some sense, we have started really appreciating the work which Chairman Pai is doing in FCC. And I think we have been learning. In fact, I must say, it's of course both ways, but largely it is the FCC which has been providing the leadership in both telecom and also the broadcasting sector, and we have been learning from Chairman Pai and his efforts. So again, it's a great opportunity for me. And I must also say good evening to all the participants in this event. My friend Atul Tiwari, whom I have known since last 2-3 decades. So he is also one of the finest officers of the Indian Administrative Service in our country. As Chairman Pai pointed out, the technology has changed the landscape of the entire broadcasting sector, like many sectors. Information and communication technology has been one of the greatest, change disruptor, whatever you call it, change maker. And this, especially in the broadcasting sector, both the distribution side and the production side, all value chain has undergone a phenomenal change. Convergence has actually started playing, and now the same device can do multiple jobs. So from a mobile phone, a smartphone, you can watch television, you can watch OTTs, you can watch, you can do your other stuff. Similarly, the television, the broadband at home, you can have broadband and you can watch television, you can have IPTV. So there is a huge kind of convergence taking place in this sector. The habits of the people, have also undergone a change. So this is what has really, churned the sector in some sense, or really provided also new opportunities of growth. And some of the technological advances impacting the sector are proliferation of smartphones, 4G technologies, video on demand. And the telecom networks, as I said, are now capable of providing access to broadcast content in addition to telecommunication services. And similarly, with digitization, cable TV networks can also provide broadband services. Market-related convergence also occurs due to consumer expectation of one-step service availability, bundling of services, and right price packages. Technological changes are also taking place in the broadcasting value chain, right from the origination of content, transmission of TV channels, and type of consumer devices used to receive TV channels. On channel production side, HD channels are becoming increasingly popular due to high consumer demand. 4K Ultra HD and 8K Ultra HD is making inroads into the broadcasting space due to better resolution and enhanced viewing experiences. Another change which has happened is the rise of social media, democratic internet access, and the proliferation of smartphones and tablets have changed the demand and expectations of the media consumers. The result is an astounding variety of new digital products and services. Similarly, distribution side also, as I explained, what has happened is that the DTH providers and the cable TV providers, they are also now providing the broadband services. So essentially, content providers, broadcasters, and consumers are quickly adopting to the rapidly rising popularity of OTT and digital platforms. Television as a medium will continue to grow as penetration and digitization increases, but it is the proliferation of high-speed data networks and cheaper and smarter devices that will result in the rapid growth of video on demand and the OTT services. Now, as I explained, again, the consumer, convergence of telecommunication and broadcasting networks would enable optimal utilization of networks and encourage merger and acquisition among telecom and broadcasting organizations. This will result in increased competition and cost pressures. Separation of application services from the networks offers opportunities for innovation to meet the consumer demand. I don't know, somehow Vivek in the beginning pointed out that there is a huge regulatory burden on the sector. I for one really don't sort of think so. Maybe of course perceptions differ, because the industry thinks that regulator is having a very high-handed approach, and the regulator thinks that I'm very light touch and I'm virtually not regulating at all and everything is free. So that's a difference in perception. But I believe that the basic approach which TRAI has had in regulating this sector since 2004, when this sector was kind of given to us for regulating purposes, we have adopted a very, very light touch approach, and we have allowed the market forces to sort of operate in this space. We believe that market is the best determinant and the best accelerator for adoption of new technologies, adoption of new demands, and satisfying the satisfaction of the consumer. So I think so long as there is a fair play, there is a transparency, there is a non-discrimination, and then we don't really need to intervene. However, there are certain times and there are certain areas where we feel that from a consumer perspective, I think consumer deserves to know as to what is the cost of the stuff which he or she is watching, and whether there is a transparency involved in that. So this is something which we have always been very, very concerned about, that the consumer should not suffer in the process. The competition must play, but it should play out in a manner that it gives full freedom of choice to the consumers. So therefore, after long many years, in 2017, we brought out a new framework, which essentially talked about which was centered around consumer choice. And I think that framework has been quite successful. That's my impression, at least, to ensure that, those channels which consumers want to watch, the consumers must have a choice to watch. They must also, India being a very price sensitive market, they should also know as to what is the value of the channel which they are watching. So that's another part. Similarly, there should be an assured income to the distributors of the channel. So we introduced a concept of the network capacity fee, which is a fixed amount, whether, whatever channel you watch, there's a fixed amount of network capacity fee which you have to pay. So I think overall we tried to straighten the market. And also we wanted to ensure that the real choice lies in the hands of the consumer. So that framework was, litigated for quite a long time, and ultimately in December of 2018, we were able to introduce that framework. Then, of course, certain aberrations came out during the implementation, which we rectified in another framework, which we typically, people call it NTO2, New Tariff Order 2.0. So I think that broadly now we are in a situation where there's a complete transparency, and we hope that things will play out subject to these overarching considerations of non-discrimination, transparency, and broad choice to the consumers. Recently, we have also done something for the consumer benefit, which is basically the consumer should be able to select the channels which he or she wants to watch, which means we have come up with a reference application, which is a channel selector application, which we have deployed, which we have actually launched a couple of a week back probably, and all the distributors are participating in that. So therefore, you are able to reach your platform and then make an API call to the platform, and API call will revert back saying that this is your current subscription. Now you can change the subscription and you can again submit back through an API call to essentially change your subscription. This is complete privacy protection. This is protection of the information of all the stakeholders. So I think that's also another initiative which we have taken. We believe that as the process as the technology moves forward, as Chairman Pai indicated, 5G and other kind of technologies will come. They will fundamentally change. Again, there will be another kind of disruption, and they will change the watching habits of the population. And I think the emerging trends will necessitate realigning the existing regulatory framework. We are not saying that what is being done today is the final word. Ultimately, regulation should kind of ensure that the technological developments are not throttled or sort of scuttled. They are allowed to grow, they are allowed to take place, and they are allowed to proceed. So that's the approach which we are saying. Regulation is largely not anti, it's always post facto in some sense. So let the things allow, and only when you realize that there is some market failure, there is some problem emerging, only then you should intervene. That will be the approach of the TRAI, hopefully in future too. So with that, I'd like to again compliment FICCI for organizing this wonderful event, and of course meeting our old friends. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman Sharma, and thank you for laying out your vision on what's been achieved, and also some of the goals that you've undertaken, and we'll come back to them in the Q&A. Without further ado, I'd like to invite our next esteemed guest, Additional Secretary for the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, Mr. Atul Kumar Tiwari.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's my privilege to be on this panel today with respected Sri R.S. Sharma ji, who combines his administrative acumen with the technological prowess, and he is an example for all of us. Thank you very much, sir, for saying kind things about me. It's the first time I'm also meeting Mr. Pai and also Mr. Koto and Mrs. Bhanot. My greetings to you all. The topic which is given today is rather mouthful in the sense that it says regulating creativity, overcoming legacy challenges, quote, future of M&E. Mr. Pai laid down astounding capabilities of the technological changes. Dr. Sharma gave the realistic estimate of what all that may or may not happen. specifically underlining the need for realignment of the regulations. For the ministry, we had a very cordial and warm working relationship with ATRI. Thank you very much, sir. Because of the help of TRI, we have been able to remove so many creases in our regulations, and we continually depend upon the TRI's sagacious advice to chart our next course of action. Having said that, the disruption of the COVID-19 is quite unprecedented. The M&E sector, whether it is broadcasters, FM radios, community radios, or the cable connections, or so many related elements, they have been besieging this government for different kind of reliefs. And we hope to see that as the lockdown goes away and the discretionary consumption expenditure will also rise, and so will the profitability of the M&E in sector as such. But in the meanwhile, as our Prime Minister had said, that there are two things which will guide we should guide the course of action. One is resilience, and another is togetherness. On the togetherness, as the speakers before me, much learned than I am, I've told about the digital convergence, whether it is the virtual reality or whether it is coming to mobile, whether the 5G, etc. That is a factor which we have taken into account. Similarly, the regulatory challenges which was going to be there, which is about the video on demand. Very recently, the Ministry of Telecom has allowed the internet service providers just ₹1 license fee for the year, and we hope that all the cable operators will also use the cable connection for the land-based broadband connection as well, which will further improve the internet connectivity and the speed. There are certain legacies which we have to deal with, and on that account, I will just list out without taking much time. Very simply, the most immediate thing which we have in mind is the SOP, so that the shooting and other broadcasting programming activities starts. We are hoping to get it cleared from the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare today, tomorrow. So that is the first start thing. We have the film facilitation unit. We have also worked on the plugging the piracy part in our Cinematography Act. That also awaits the approval of the Parliament. We are also working with the FICCI on the EVGC policy, and I'm happy to share that the Ministry of Commerce is quite gung-ho about that, and they would like to support us in that account as well. The champion sector, in which we give incentives for creating content in India, has also been more or less approved. We are also going to have some kind of interaction with the DPIIT on the copyright issues, which are all part of the legacy issues. On the OTT or the VOD regulations, there's a lot of debate around. We know what should be required, etc., but we are allowing the industry to come back with their response. On the TV broadcasting side, we have in the process of further improving the uplinking and downlinking guidelines, and the DTH guidelines. We're also doing the improvements in the Cable TV's Network Act, which are the existing legislations. And we have also sought relief for the FM radios. Once we have given some deferment, we are trying to give them again. And of course, we are also trying very hard to get the infrastructure status for the broadcasting sector. And as you would know that the Doordarshan or TV viewership has increased tremendously during the lockdown period. And we think that there will be a spate of new programming as well to sustain this increase in the viewership. But on the industry side, I would say that there has to be an increase in the digital immersive technologies. And for the companies, the private companies concerned there, I think the biggest emphasis is now on cash management and profit protection, as well as saving the salaries. But in future, I assume that, as Dr. Sharma was also saying, knowing the consumer preferences and aligning the products according to the consumer preferences by using the AI or the cloud or the analytics will be very, very important. And the survey part is also going to be very important, as well as the skilling part. So in all, I would say that there are certain things in the pandemic which are not going to change, which is the need for the content, whether it is the submersive content or using the legacy content and making it a new one. what would change is there some of the bad habits which we all have, and there will be some cost cutting, there will be more efficiency gains because of the disruption. And what should change is the, what shall I say, what was quietly hinted was the regulatory burden, and we hope to work on this aspect as well. So I will listen to others, and if necessary, I will handle questions whenever they come. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tiwari. Thank you so much for that. And we'll come back to you on the Q&A. Now, please welcome Ms. Jyoti Jindgar, advisor for the economics side for the Competition Commission of India. Welcome, Jyoti.
Thank you, Vivek. Good evening, the esteemed panelists and all those who are part of this session today. First of all, I thank Vicky for inviting me for this session. It is indeed a privilege to be part of this event. I had an occasion to watch some of the sessions, and they were very enriching, and I have learned a lot listening to different views and perspectives. Now, last few months have been very trying and have witnessed unprecedented situations. And we can safely say that media and entertainment has played a pivotal role in keeping people engaged and occupied. And to that extent, I think it deserves to be complimented. And I think that has been possible to some extent because of the regulatory framework, the statutory framework, which have allowed people to innovate, to compete, and to adapt very swiftly to the changing demands and the changing situation. And I think that underlines the importance of very well-functioning markets, good regulations, and competition. And that, to my mind, is the power of well-functioning markets and competition. Competition is the life force of markets that creates the best incentives for business to increase efficiency, drives their productivity, and fuels innovation. And that is what we witnessed. Wide-ranging economic reforms of the 90s laid the foundation of this new India, making a radical departure from the regime of command and control. We adopted a new industrial policy which placed reliance on the market forces. And these constituted unlocking from legacy architecture. And in keeping with this change, the erstwhile and outdated MRTP was replaced with a modern and dynamic Competition Act, which we have today. And this new economic order ensures protection, promotion of competition, and fair play in the market. This paradigm shift from the previous law and focuses on promoting competition rather than curbing monopolies. But despite its all embracing benefits, healthy competition may not emerge on its own. Even the most ardent votaries of market economy recognize that liberalized markets cannot be presumed to be competitive and efficient, and without a solid oversight and necessary interventions, we could witness a chaotic environment where dominant firms may misuse their market powers, the competitors may cartelize to drive up prices, and the mergers may happen where innovation is curtailed, and in the process, the consumers lose, the economy lose, the productivity is lost. Therefore, the need of regulatory oversight cannot be overemphasized. However, at the same time, it should be ensured that such oversight is not locked into legacy architecture. It is regularly fine-tuned with the changing times and must suit the dynamic business environment, especially in the present digital market. And the competition law in its present avatar has now been around for over 10 years. Being an economic law, it rests on the sound foundation of economics and economic principles. The assessment and the act is essentially a case-to-case economic cost benefit assessment, which allows enough room to take into account the specificities of the case and provides enough flexibility to respond in a very dynamic manner. In fact, the act is very futuristic, and recently the CLRC committee, which was set up to review the act, it found that the act is robust enough to meet the challenges which have been thrown by the new age markets, and it does not require any major rehauling. And this is really very assuring. And this aspect assumes significance in the context of technology and disruptive innovations, where the convergence has resulted in the change of the very nature of the products and services. Now it is very difficult to box or categorize a product or a service under a particular head and kind of say that this is how it needs to be regulated. And the markets are becoming very complex. This requires a very deep understanding of the dynamics. The convergence has brought in a lot of efficiencies. At the same time, it cannot be ruled out that there is room for anti-competitive action, which could be in terms of the agreements which are entered amongst the players at different chains, which are, as the products become vertically linked. So there could be, occasions where the platforms kind of give preferential treatment to one vis-a-vis others as the players gain market power, particularly in case of platforms where the winners tend to take all. There are a lot of issues related to competition. So in that sense, it is very important that a very dynamic approach is kept, and the response has to be such that we do not, through our interventions, scuttle or chill innovation. It has to be a very well calibrated response where we are able to address the anti-competitive effects, at the same time allow innovation and technological development to take place. And in that context, Commission has been following a multi-pronged approach, which is an approach of clubbing, our market, and first of all, enhancing our market understanding of these products and services, because it is very critical that we understand these technologies, how they function, what are the synergies they bring along. Secondly, the role of advocacy, that we reach out to the players, because there could be lack of understanding, there could be lack of awareness, particularly in the context of cases involving market power, where there are a lot of efficiencies. So there could be a gray line between what is pro-competitive and what is anti-competitive. So it is very important to sensitize and guide that what are the rules of the game. And lastly, the enforcement also needs to take into account, it has to be a light hand approach where it is able to take into account the benefits that these, kind of arrangements bring along, and we are able to factor in and give remedies which enhance competition, at the same time take care of any aberrations which are there in the market. So I think to conclude, markets are not static, they are ever changing, and the regulatory stance also needs to be well calibrated and nuanced. The regulatory toolbox needs to be adapted to these changes so that the instrumentality remains relevant and appropriate. With these words, I conclude my remarks.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Jindgar, and thank you to all our esteemed panelists for laying out a vision and how their particular key issues from their particular industries and segments, and for Mr. Pai and Mr. Sharma to really lay out some of the key achievements on technology, innovation, and growth in their sector. I think the key thing, there's a lot of stuff we can discuss on this session. I think both the US and India are at obviously different stages of development, but what is happening globally is we are seeing the onset and the growth of a significant digital economy with streaming video and connectivity at its core. At the same time, people are looking to protect and grow a vibrant broadcasting ecosystem. And in India, which is an emerging market, television is still very much front and center and still has a long way to run. Ajit, in the US, I think cord cutting has been a significant trend in the last few years, largely because of the growth of broadband, which also grew ironically as a result of cable investment in broadband and connectivity, which the FCC helped to promote. My key question is, Mr. Sharma, you used an interesting word. You said light touch regulation. And, fortunately or unfortunately, I'm not a stakeholder and I don't own broadcasting or pay TV platforms. But the view from the industry is that, it hasn't been light touch. And I'll come to that in a minute and why that perspective is there. But Ajit, from your perspective, do you believe, as you look economically at regulation, obviously, the goal is to promote consumer choice and competition. So what are your goals when you look at broadcasting and pay TV sector regulations? But, in India, we've come to a situation where the regulator, specifies television prices, bundling rules, and has been doing that through different phases and different eras. That in any other context would not sound very light touch. And it also seems to provide an incentive for people who own content to potentially abandon traditional television distribution in favor of just streaming on the internet. What's your perspective on that?
A good question. And here I would share Chairman Sharma's typically thoughtful view that markets are far better positioned to deliver consumer value at the end of the day than preemptive regulation. And so here in the United States, for example, I have opposed preemptive market structure regulations that dictate that a newspaper cannot buy a broadcaster, for example, or that two radio stations should not be allowed to combine. Those types of preemptive regulations I don't think serve the marketplace well. And similarly, the broadcast television companies in the United States are singled out for regulations based on rules that were written back in 1975, even though the marketplace is very, very different, obviously internet, video, and cable and the rest. So we've tried to unshackle all of the market players, but especially those who have been typically the legacy regulation, borne the burden of legacy regulations, to allow them to compete fully and fairly. One good example of that is digital advertising in the United States and perhaps in India as well. What we hear consistently from broadcasters is, look, we're competing for advertising dollars, not just against each other, but primarily with Google and Facebook now. Yet your rules still presume in the digital advertising space that we are the only competitors. That's just not the way it is. And so we've tried to encourage all agencies to have a more holistic view of what competition is in 2020, regardless of what it might have been in 1975, and then allow everybody to compete in a full and fair way.
Understood. Okay, and I'll come back to you a little bit more on some of that, but also I wanted to talk to you a little bit about level playing field competition, because in the US, you do have so many levels of competition, so many layers of competition, but there's also been a lot of consolidation in the sector. And there's still ongoing consolidation. We've seen that with studios and broadcasters and so forth. How have you maintained a level playing competition, field playing competition, between sort of new entrants to the sector, such as, say, a Netflix, and traditional players who have broadcasting entities or who are competing like Comcast and so forth? And just take us through the different sides of the debate and say in relation to net neutrality, into also the pricing of services, because it would seem, have you kept both broadcasting and streaming, or OTT video as it's called, fairly unregulated in the US?
Certainly OTT is not regulated by the FCC, and that was purposeful because we wanted to encourage the development of these new interactive IP-based services. And that's part of the reason why my goal has not been to saddle the new players, the OTT players, with the legacy regulations that broadcasters face, but rather to relax the regulations that broadcasters face to allow them to compete in a similarly unshackled way. And part of the concern I have when it comes to all these things you've discussed, net neutrality, some of the legacy broadcast regulations, it's looking at the marketplace of today through the prism of yesterday. I think the time is long since passed, especially in the digital era space, where regulators can take a snapshot of the marketplace and moment in time, craft regulations based on that snapshot, and assume that the snapshot will remain current for years to come. It's very, very difficult for us to envision a situation in which regulations can keep up with the pace of innovation. And so our goal is to preserve, as I think Jyoti put well, the basic structure of competition in the marketplace, making sure that nobody behaves any competitively, but not single out a sector of the economy for preemptive regulation, because inevitably the kind of central planning or common carrier regulation that is doomed to fail. It will disincentivize investment, deter innovation, and ultimately hurt the very consumers it was intended to help.
Understood. Thank you, and we'll come back to you in a minute. Esteemed guest, Mr. Sharma, there's no doubt that the TRI and has ushered in a lot of new changes. Some of them are very progressive, and congratulations on that. In some ways, looking at the television industry in terms of technological transformation, say, in the last 20 years, actually, the most fundamental would have to be the digitalization of cable networks, which really progressed and accelerated in 2011 and 12, and the launch of direct-to-home satellite television in India, both of which actually took place in the US between 95 onwards, and so forth. So what I'm trying to understand, sir, is DTH obviously gave consumers choice and competition. Digital cable promoted addressability and so forth. So why is it, and this predates you as well, sir, from 2003 to 2020, there has been a systemic intervention in wholesale, retail, packaging, and pricing at every level, number one. And number two, there is a perception, and again, please correct me if I'm wrong, because this is not my perception, this is more an industry perception, and we're getting questions from some of the attendees, that when it gets to a situation of some level of what I would call market stability, for it to move into a free market, you shift the goalposts quite significantly. So no stakeholder knows really where he is or she is. And therefore, that limits long-term investments in a sector that could have been one of the more dynamic sectors in India to match with IT and other fast-growing sectors.
Well, Vivek, thank you very much for asking those questions. And I think I will use this opportunity to demystify, or at least, sort of bust some of the myths which are there, and some of the impressions which are being created about the regulation of this sector. So first is the broad overarching objective of TRAI is to ensure that there is a interest of consumers and interest of the stakeholders, which is basically the distributors, creators, content creators, etc. They are protected, and at the same time there is a healthy growth of the sector. So that's the broad overarching objective. Now, let me share with you something that since 2004 till 2017, there were actually the price caps. You talked about the pricing and why TRAI is mandating the pricing and stuff like that. So let me just tell you some factual situations. One is that there was a price cap zoner-wise. Basically, it says that, for the entertainment, there should be a channel should not be priced for more than 8 rupees. For a new channel, 5 rupees, etc. This was basically per month. This was the system prevailing till 2017. And, we think that if you put such kind of price caps, it is disincentivizing the producers of the content, because ultimately, as a producer, I must have the choice as to how much price I want to put for my product. Now, if I put more price, nobody will buy it probably if the content is not good. But if I put less price, then content is very good. This is ultimately why should I really keep any control on the prices? For example, there could be a golfing channel. The viewers may be very a small number, but at the same time, it's a niche channel, and people can price at 200 rupees. So why should I keep the cap? This is one of the things which has been done, and there is absolutely no price cap on any channel whatsoever. This price cap was actually abandoned or sort of lifted in the new regulation, which I was talking about, NTO 1.0, as you call it, started in March of 2017, and finally after litigations, cleared by the Supreme Court of India, which actually declared that this is one of the absolutely perfect framework, because it has been brought out after long consultation, but that's a separate issue. So one is there are no price caps on any of the channels. That's number one. Number two is then you say that you are telling how much should I package my stuff. Now obviously you cannot package the stuff in such a manner that these channels, the pricing which you are keeping, individual pricing. We said you keep whatever pricing you want. So individual channels are prices 5 rupees, 10 rupees, 50 rupees. So be it. That's not a problem. But at the same time, we said that, look, if you do a bouquet of these channels, then you can't have bouquet done in such a manner which makes the entire thing a perverse exercise. Let me give you an example. If you have 5 channels, each priced individually by you only, broadcasters, I'm not putting a cap, of 10 rupees each. And then you say that 5 channels, a bouquet of that, I'll give you 5 rupees. Look, the individual total of the prices of 5 bouquets will be 50 rupees. And if you say the total bouquet, I'll give at 5 rupees. Now, this is something which is actually, you are making a fool of the customer. Come on. Because the customer will obviously take all the channels of the 5 rupees, whether he wants to watch the 4 channels or not. So this is not the way. Basically, you should make the whole thing very, very transparent, and you should have some kind of broad, rational and ratio of the pricing of these bouquets and channels. That's what we actually perfected, because what is happening, 19 rupees, 10 paisa. Now, you are putting 10 paisa for a channel for a whole month, and you are coupling it with 19 rupees. This is not really a great, sort of pricing.
I think.
So what I'm saying is, look, the whole thing, it has to be a balance between the consumer choice, the industry's, sort of growth and their protection, and the overall health of the sector. Now, with regard to why did we change? Yes, we changed because some broadcasters started misusing that freedom in a way that, they are now pricing the bouquets much, much less than each component. Come on, it's not buy one, get one free. It's actually the way it is structured there should be some rationale. That's the whole idea. Of course, there are many things I can speak about that issue, but I think for the sake of time, I'll not really, I just pointed out one issue which you kind of pointed out that.
No, sir, but it's not. I mean, I pointed out one issue, but it's fine. I'm just interested, sir. As you've presided over this, and as I said, you've done a lot of good stuff. What has been? We know what look. We know that broadcasters and platforms have a moral responsibility in India, and that must be kept. Okay. It's a great responsibility, and great responsibility comes great power. And many of the broadcasters in India have observed that. But I'm interested in, besides that, and obviously that's more to the MIB side, and I'll come to Mr. Tiwari about that in a minute. But I'm interested in the debate on why you are prescribing, you said this is what they should do, this is what they should do. That does seem very micro-regulation. And Ajit, I'll come to you. I mean, India and the US are probably, arguably, along with a couple of our markets, the greatest functioning democracies today in the world. How come we've never seen such price intervention in the US? It seems in the US, when there is such an issue, there's usually a blackout. In fact, there have been disputes in the last 3 years between Viacom and Dish, with HBO and various with the other systems. And there's been a lot of disputes in the last 3 years because a lot of vertical integration, a lot of consolidation. Does the FCC intervene? Do you tell Comcast or AT&T how to price their services, or do you tell broadcasters how to price their services to cable operators? And the pay TV universe is as ubiquitous as it is in India today, so could be considered an essential service.
Vivek, if I'm not able to convince you that the price caps have been lifted, then of course it's a failure.
No, I'm talking about the wholesale service side, sir.
No, it's a failure on my part to communicate. But let me also tell you that this is a framework which has been challenged in the court of law. And ultimately, you should respect that verdict. You can't sort of just say that because you are criticizing it, therefore it's bad. The courts have had, and the Supreme Court of India, I think the judgment of Supreme Court of India is a law of the land. They have given a verdict and supporting this entire framework. I mean, you may have your views and some of the stakeholders may have their views, but that's not really important. What is important is that we are creating a framework which is actually, it's difficult, for regulators to strike a balance between the consumer choice, consumer empowerment, and the health of the industry, and, to ensure.
I completely agree. And sir, this is not my view. I'm just expressing a view on a lot of stakeholders. And I completely agree that you've balanced consumer interest. Before I turn to Mr. Tiwari and Mr. Jindgar, I think the main issue, sir, is, people have said this on day one of FICCI. We've come to a situation in India where advertising is the mainstay of a lot of our revenues. And there is a notion also that the innovation in content that we saw in the Indian television marketplace, arguably between, say, 1997, 98 to 2010, has really significantly reduced. And in fact, most of that innovation has started passing on to streaming, in terms of new content and new dynamism on that content and creativity. But it's a big issue and it's hurting the creative economy. And a lot of stakeholders are linking that to regulation. And that's fundamentally the point I'm trying to make. And I'm saying, do you agree with that or do you don't agree with that?
No, I certainly don't agree with that. And I also don't agree with the fact that the industry is trying to do that. In fact, there are many stakeholders in the industry, even broadcasters, who are not there. Maybe certain players, their interests are affected. They may be opposed to it, and that's what is happening in the legal system. But I don't agree with the fact that the entire industry is opposed to it. That's not correct. Just because some people are opposed to it doesn't mean that everybody is opposed to it. Please understand that.
I agree. Okay. We've run out of time and we must go to our other two esteemed guests with specific questions. And I apologize for coming to both of you a bit late in this session. Additional Secretary Tiwari, thank you for your opening statements. I guess I just want to jump the queue a little bit to the burgeoning online video sector. And obviously everywhere in the world, and Ajit, I'd love to hear your perspective on this, everywhere in the world, from Indonesia through to India, through various other markets, are figuring out whether to level up or level down or level. How do you deal with content regulations in the streaming arena? Is there a content code for streaming platforms? As I said, there is a moral responsibility of broadcasters and OTT platforms. What is your view on that?
Well, we have been asked this question many a times, and our secretary, Mr. Khare, also in the inaugural, he said, he laid down a brief roadmap for that. Only thing I can say without causing any controversy is that we have had a discussion with the OTT providers. They came through an association, and we invited them to come back to us with some kind of self-regulation mechanism. And we had given them some time, maybe to be exact, we had given them 100 days. And we expect them to get back to us with their own recipe, I would say, for regulation. But Mr. Khare was very right, very emphatic in saying that he wanted a light touch regulation. And so the ball is in the court of the OTT service providers first. On our part, we have done the study of the Singapore model, we have studied the Canada model, Australia model. And in fact, if the things as Mr. Pai and Dr. Sharma were saying, if you see a great convergence taking place in near future, perhaps we need to have a relook at the whole regulation aspect. And the problem here is that at present, because these are the internet service providers, they are streaming devices, streaming content. As per our regulatory system, it is being under the IT Act. And there is a need for a confabulation between our ministry and the IT ministry as well, which we are also doing. So I would sum it up saying that we are aware of the problem, and we'd like to have a light touch regulation, and we'd like the industry to come forward and give their own formula for regulation. But certainly, there has to be some amount of regulation on the streaming content.
Understood, sir. Thank you. Ms. Jindgar, the CCI is obviously in a much enviable position of looking at competition and also encouraging some levels of investment in the sector. Today, the bone of contention is that there is something of an unlevel playing field in the media and entertainment markets in India, particularly across certain key segments, somewhat because of legacy regulatory constraints in traditional sectors like television, and which are even more legacy because you've seen the fast pace of change brought about by digital, which has been enabled by the acceleration of broadband connectivity driven by geo. Does the CCI advocate deregulation to level the playing field? And if so, what are your thoughts on that?
So firstly, I must clarify the role of CCI because mostly our role comes, as a post facto, ex post role is there. So we do not, as such, lay down the rules of the game, which is primarily the role of the, sectoral regulator. Having said that, the markets remain neutral. There is level playing field is a very important aspect of our mandate, in the sense that we are very keen that any dominant player in the market should not act in such a manner that it distorts the level playing field. It creates entry barriers, and so all these aspects are taken into account while undertaking assessment in terms of the provisions of the act. And even while regulating our merger and acquisition activity, these aspects are taken into account, that where we do some kind of a crystal gazing to see that whether what will be the impact on the market of these combinations. Would they distort is there a possibility of distorting the level playing field, and the preferential treatment being given. And to the extent possible, these are also rectified through remedies which could be structural or behavioral. But as far as the conduct cases are concerned, it goes in the form of the assessment of the cases.
Understood.
I hope I have addressed your question.
No, you have. We've run out of time, but I would like to close with just one parting 1 minute question, and just very quickly, from Mr. Pai and Mr. Sharma, who are both transitioning from their positions, what is your biggest legacy you are leaving the sector? For Mr. Kumar and Ms. Jindgar, what is your biggest challenge and initiative that you have to overcome in the future? You want to go first, Mr. Pai?
Sure. So just to clarify, I'm not going anywhere anytime soon. At least I don't.
Sorry, I beg your pardon. I didn't mean that. I was misinformed.
And I certainly hope Chairman Sharma doesn't either. But for us, at least, I think matching the regulations to the modern marketplace, making sure that everyone has a strong incentive to innovate and invest, enabling America to be a leader in 5G and other emerging technologies. And one of the core purposes is close to my heart as well, making sure that as many Americans as possible have access to these technologies. It's great, of course, to have innovation, but if that innovation is off limits to a wide swath of the American consumer marketplace, then that isn't in the public interest either. So making this technology more accessible to many more Americans.
Understood. Thank you.
Should I come in now?
Yes, why not?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it's a very important question, especially in my context, because I am transitioning. I'll be completing my tenure by September end. So one of my I think one milestone which was achieved is the digitization of the entire network. And this has ensured that there is transparency in the entire value chain in terms of the number of customers. Because earlier, in the analog kind of era, nobody was knowing as to how many people are watching which channel, and there was always a dispute between the broadcasters and the distribution platforms about the number of customers, etc. So this digitization has brought out an era, and this is of course a joint effort of the Ministry of IB and the TRAI, which has been completed in 2017. Now, after that, we realized that while everybody else in the value chain had got the benefits of digitization, where it was completely transparent, the number of subscribers and stuff like that, the consumers were not really getting the benefits of that. So I think one of our sort of efforts has been to ensure that the consumer also becomes the basic beneficiary in that process. What was happening is that suppose we have a survey which says that on an average, average consumer watches 90% of the consumer watches less than 50 channels or less. And now we have in India 926 channels. And obviously, if every channel is forced on every consumer and he's asked to pay for it, that's not fair. That's not a fair deal. And therefore, one of the efforts which we made was to ensure that the consumer gets to purchase what he wants to watch and pay only for that. And of course, another one, as I explained to you, is essentially removing all the price caps and all the legacy kind of sort of regulation in that sense, because we believe that it is the producer who should have the right to fix the prices of his product. It is a consumer who should have the power to buy that product at that price or not. So essentially, I think, and it's very interesting, Vivek, in terms of the size, the broadcasting sector is quite small compared to the telecom sector.
Exactly.
But number of disputes which happen in the TD set, one of the appellate authority which hears the disputes of both telecom and broadcasting sector, you'll be surprised to know that 95% of the dispute relate to broadcasting sector. Now, after the new framework has come into place, the number of disputes has reduced very, very considerably. And we believe that if there are less disputes among these service providers, and these are the disputes obviously among the service providers, among the MSOs and broadcasters and the other cable TV operators, etc. And if those disputes have reduced, which means that there is a certain amount of clarity, there is a certain amount of transparency which has come, which has resulted in these disputes being less. And I think the lesser the disputes, I think the more is the situation where people will be able to focus on their core business rather than going to the courts. So that I think is one of the things which we think we have sort of been able to achieve. I must also add that after all, it is not the legacy of an individual; it's an organization which actually functions. So I should not credit the legacy to myself or to say that it is R.S. Sharma who has done certain things. It's the entire organization which has been able to do things, and of course, with the help and active participation of all the stakeholders. As you know, TRAI does not do anything without an open, active, transparent, and of course going on for months consultative process where we take views of every stakeholder. Thank you.
Mr. Tiwari and Ms. Jindgar, just very quickly, what are you most excited about in the future as you look at the media and entertainment sector? Mr. Tiwari, you mentioned light touch and streaming video. And can you qualify a little bit more on what are you looking forward to in the future?
Vivek, there's so much to do in the M&E sector, and some of it is scattered between the ministries, and to see them as a separate entity requiring a special treatment is going to be the first challenge. And during the COVID time, we only hope and pray that the M&E industry gets back to its stride and maintains the risk appetite and creates more jobs and world-class content from India. And we, the professional civil servants and regulators, we do not create any mess. We allow this to happen. It's the biggest challenge. And about the light touch regulation, there's so many strands of thoughts are there. And it will be very interesting to watch how all of them coalesce into some kind of a definite framework which satisfies the concerns of all the stakeholders.
Understood.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tafari. Miss.
So, as I think I've already covered this aspect in my talk, the biggest challenge for a regulator like CCI is to achieve the right intervention, which is proportionate, which is timely, does not chill innovation, at the same time is able to bring about market correction.
Understood. Well, thank you very much to all of you today. Mr. Sharma, I wish you good night, but not goodbye, and I hope you enjoy your journey to the next next thing you do, and congratulations on all that you've done, and all the best to our panelists. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vivek. That was a wonderful session moderated by you. Thank you to the panel. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll now move to the last session of the day. Give us 5 minutes and see you for the next